Reactive training systems.
All right, Ross. So first off, thanks for joining me again on the podcast. But this is a particular episode. We wanted to have you back specifically to talk about your upcoming classroom because it's a really broad topic, and it's something that I think is potentially interesting to anybody who's an athlete, at least. And we'll kind of get more into the potentials there. But anyway, so your classroom's about mental training for powerlifting. So I suppose a good place to start is if you want to give us a kind of a quick synopsis of what you're going to be talking about, and just kind of what the gist of the class is, and maybe that's a good jumping off point for some more involved discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose the gist of it, the way I kind of look at some of this stuff is I like to break it up into two different parts. I like to look at like the person outside of lifting and away from training and that aspect, and then also look at the person as an athlete. And I look at that from that perspective for a couple of different reasons. One, I think if we are able to create, healthy habits as a person, from a perspective of how we go about our life, and healthy habits of, creating some positivity in our minds, those aspects are going to bleed over and take care of us as an athlete. So, we've all had those bad training sessions or a bad meet or something like that. If we're in a good place, I think for ourselves as a person, we're going to be less volatile to those down sessions or those down meets. We're not going to freak out. We're not going to let it drive us, because we know there's a bigger picture to the process. We know there's more than that one specific moment in time. As well as if we're in a good place mentally for ourselves as a person, and that takes care of the lifter, we're going to be able to better capture our potential. We're going to be able to have less of those bad days and less of those bad moments and less of those down meets where we're missing lifts and not hitting where we ought to be hitting, as we're able to control those aspects and those emotions, especially on meet day, that can kind of detract us and cause us to not perform as well as we ought to, as well as we think we should, because we're kind of distracted from an actual lifting and getting distracted by those emotions that come up during meet day. So it kind of fleshes itself out in a sense that there's those two different aspects, and that the person doing things for the person will also bleed over and do things for the athlete. And then obviously there's a lot more details into it, as far as like what you do to do that, what it looks like to actually do that and create those different environments.
So yeah, I mean that makes sense that, getting into details for something like what do you actually do for mental training is somewhat akin to getting into details for what you would do for any other kind of training, in that there's going to be variance from one person to the next. And I can see how it would quickly become kind of this thing where it's like, should I do sets of 4 or sets of 5? There are definite answers, but they're context dependent answers, and you need to have some tools and understand them in order to know which tool to apply. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting that I think holds that has a play into a lot of this stuff. It's like we see high level successful athletes that are in a much bigger place than we are as powerlifters. You see like NFL players or NBA players or something like that have career ending off the field issues. Why? Like, they have so much athletic potential, yet they're failing off the field. that's ending their careers. It's ending it's ending what they're to achieve that potential. And that's because they're not in a good place for themselves as a person, and it's causing poor choices, and they do poor things in life, and that bleeds over into then their athletes or their athletic performance, and it takes away from that. So there's that aspect as well. I think you can see that in powerlifting, just not as detailed, I suppose. Like if you see somebody come into powerlifting and they're like a flash in the pan as far as like, oh, here's a really good performance, and then all of a sudden they're not there the next year. Like, what happened? Where'd they go? Probably dealing with some personal stuff, most likely. It's not always going to be injury. It could be a plethora of things. It's all speculative, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that work for you as a coach then? So when you're in a coaching role, um, how does a coach get involved at this level of analysis?
Oh, I mean, that can be difficult. A lot of it, I suppose, would depend on like where the lifter feels comfortable talking about certain things. Not everybody is going to be open and willing to share personal details. So I guess all you can do is, if conversations like that come up, you can hopefully make some encouragements to try some different things, and to create more positivity. And I think it's easier for the coach to work with the athlete on the mental training aspects than the coach to work with the person on the mental training aspects. So you can do lots of things like creating repetitive processes and things like that in the training. So like that's not as difficult. It's potentially some of the other stuff that gets a little bit more difficult and a little bit more sensitive.
I see. So I guess that's what I was going to ask next, is if you can maybe give an example or two of something a bit more concrete, for kind of what we're talking about here, just because a lot of it's very abstract, and I know some people are going to have a difficult time kind of connecting with it, just because I mean it's hard not to be abstract, right? Because they are ideas, and they're big broad ideas. It's just that we need to. It would just be useful if we can, give some examples and help people connect with kind of some of the more ground level issues that might fall under this umbrella.
Right. I suppose I feel like I need to back up to get to that point for me. And kind of give a little bit of like history on myself and where I've come from.
Sure. Yeah. I think that, I mean, kind of getting into more of a conversation on how you got interested in this to begin with, or just where you're coming from. That would be a useful way to connect some dots, I think.
Right. For sure. So, I mean, being completely honest and backing it all the way up, we're at the end of the day, like our childhoods have a lot to do with who we are as adults, and there's very important formative years, and very important, like we're Play-Doh at that time when we're young. We get molded into a lot of different things, and our environment has a big play in that. And I suppose, I grew up in a real small town, and small is like it's like 400 people. The school K through 12 was like 300 people. It was like 300 students, so it was real small. My graduating class was like 22. And in small towns, it's difficult to get around social groups, so to speak. I'm sure it holds true in a lot of towns, but especially like small towns. families that like live in that town for multiple generations. Like they have that family lineage in that town. They like everybody knows them, and they're kind of like this, I guess, cool kids group, for lack of a better word. And so when you don't have that last name, it can be difficult to navigate some of those social environments. And that was definitely held pretty strong and pretty true in our town. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily blame that on being bullied a lot, but there wasn't anywhere else to go. Like because it was so small, you couldn't really get away from it. You couldn't go find another group of people to try and fit in with. So, I got bullied a lot, pretty significantly. And to the point where, I mean, there was hardly a day went by that I didn't get off the bus and burst into tears. And in fact, a lot of days I wouldn't even make it to the point where I'd get off the bus. General name calling and just being picked on. Fortunately, there wasn't a lot of physical harm inflicted on me. But I mean, dealing with all that put me in a real dark place, and I was in a real shitty spot for the large part of my youth. I didn't really feel like I had friends. I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't have a lot of self-confidence or self-worth or self-love. And I suppose it was the summer going in to 7th grade after my 6th grade year that it was kind of probably at its worst. And I had an attempt on my life. I thought the only solution to it all was just to end it. And so unfortunately and literally, I wanted to take my life. I wanted to end it. I felt like that was the only way out. It was a real shitty, scary spot to be. Fortunately, for whatever reason at that moment, started thinking about my parents and my family, and, they didn't deserve it. They didn't deserve it wasn't their fault. So it stopped me from doing any irreversible harm to myself. And that, I suppose, kind of got me through the next few months. And then it wasn't until the end of my 7th grade year that I finally I found the weight room. And long story short, there ended up being my outlet. It created a place for me to dispel this negative energy in my head. It gave me a place to get away. I was good at it. I was getting strong really fast. So like I finally like had this place where I felt like I fit in, and I had that escape, and that was big. It, in all honesty, probably saved my life. Obviously it's all speculative whether it did or not.
Yeah.
We can make up all the stories we want, but I mean, I really feel like it had to. So that was kind of what like started my addiction for lifting weights. But it wasn't until a little over 6 years ago, when I entered into a non-monogamous relationship, that I realized that there is still a lot of this negativity and this cloud in my head that I hadn't dealt with. And there's still a lot of self-confidence issues. And I took a long, deep look at myself and my life and realized that there was a lot of that shit that was controlling me, and it led to fear, and it led to lack of self-confidence and self-love. And I had to make the choice to just face that shit and deal with it. I couldn't keep hiding from it. It was holding me back in life, not just in lifting, but in life in general as well. So as I learned to deal with those things and build self-confidence and build self-love and get away from it, not even get away from, it's not a matter of getting away from, it's a matter of like removing its negative power over you, so to speak, because you can't like get away from it. You can't go back in time and remove that event from your life. It happened. It's there for a reason. And I guess maybe the way I look at it now is that all that happened for me to be able to be in the place that I am now today, to create something like this for other people to get benefit from, to learn how to have some things that they can go out and do to help them create more positivity in their life and help get away, or help remove that fear from past events that they don't need to fear anymore. And then that's going to, like I say, create this positive image and bring strength, mental strength into training. And they're going to be able to have better mental toughness, and they're going to be able to realize their potential in a more limitless manner.
So what did that process look like for you as you began to figure out later on, into your adult life, that, you were still, I guess, some of these thoughts and emotions and things were still pulling at you? What's that process like where you I guess, to use your words, remove their negative power?
So I suppose a way to look at it is in a context of like habits, right? A habit is obviously, it's something that is like you do, you just do it. Like sometimes you're not even aware of it. It's a habit. It's something that's repetitive. So I suppose you first have to become aware of the habit and be aware of that behavior or emotional response that you seek to remove, that you seek to change. So for, like I say, first you got to become aware of those things, and then once you're aware of them, then it's just a matter of, okay, I don't like that. I suppose a common one that I'm currently still working on, it would be like road rage. I still like get really mad at other people when they cut me off or something. And I look at it as like, me yelling at this person serves me no benefit whatsoever. All it does is like heighten my stress, and it causes unneeded tension in my body. So I want to eliminate that. So first I'm aware of the behavior, I'm aware of the habit. Now I think about, what do I want to be? What do I want to respond? How do I want to respond? So then, now that I'm aware of that, and now I know what I want to create, the habit that I want to create, I just start trying to do that as frequently as possible. And the more you do that, the more you become that. And you can remove that, negatively heightened emotional response to something that doesn't need it, that doesn't benefit you, and you can replace it, and you can create a habit you desire.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, it's similar in some ways then to the way that we create habits in the gym in other ways. So maybe a more tangible habit would be, um, being more mindful when you're walking out on the squat, um, something like that. Um, that's a bit more tangible, and it's the same type of thing. Like, identify what you're doing wrong, identify what you want to be doing, and then, um, you know, mindfully correcting it and repeating that desired behavior as many times as you can until it becomes a new habit, something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's things that are like that in the classroom as well, that get into it, as far as like for the athlete and creating habits like that. And so, like, one of the things that I'm a big fan of is mantras, and having a mantra a part of that pre-lift routine. And a few things, a few like key takeaways to like having an effective mantra, I think, are like, one, it's got to create positivity. Two, we want consistency out of it. We want to like create trust. I used to have like the word perfect in there, but I don't really like didn't really like that word, so I removed it. And I think creating trust is better. And then I think if we look at something that we're trying to change, something an inefficiency of the movement that we're trying to create more efficiency with, we talk about that as though it is a strength. So we take a weakness and we talk about it as if it is a strength.
So what's an example of how you might do that?
So like one of the issues that I used to have in my squat was especially progressing into meet, the heavier the load got, the more I'd slow down on the eccentric phase. And because I'd slow down, I'd end up putting my hips too far back, and then I'd get some hip shift out of the hole. So I talk about those as if they're strengths. First, I love squats. I squat with consistency. I trust my process. I am fast and tactful. My hips work for me. And, if you've ever watch me in training or watch me in a meet and see my mouth moving, I'm saying that before every single working set, before every single attempt. And I have that one developed for each lift. And, since the development of those weaknesses have turned into strengths, they aren't as much of a limiting factor anymore. They've turned around. Especially, excuse me. Another common one was, as you're familiar with, you writing all my programming and stuff, I've always kind of had this, for a long time, I had a struggle with getting a better, more stable flat back position. And that's improved a lot over the past several months to a little over a year, I suppose. And a lot of that, I believe, is not just like strength, but just realizing the potential and removing that language from my head. I'm not, oh, my back position sucks. No, my back position is great. My back is flat, hard, and set. And talking about, what you think you become. So
Yeah,
you're always thinking
with you that it's about figuring out the thing that you want to change and kind of claiming it, and phrasing it as though it's already happened.
Right.
And that kind of links back to another one of the seems like main principles in your philosophy here is that is linked to positivity. That seems to be a big thing. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like why positivity? You don't want people to get their energy from the haters?
I personally don't believe that it's beneficial. I think it's a distraction. I think it's like if you're thinking about what somebody else has and you're jealous about what they have, you're going to not be grateful about what you have. And so there's I forget the name of the study or whatever they did, but they did this they did a study with chimpanzees, I think it was. One of the different monkeys. I forget the actual which specific breed, I guess. So, but they're reward-based behavior, right? And they're taught how to do a task, and they get rewarded with a cucumber, and the monkey is real happy with it. And then they're super happy with life and super happy that, oh, this is a delicious cucumber. It's great, fantastic, awesome. And then the monkey next to him, they do it right next to him so that it can see that monkey A can see what monkey B is doing. Monkey B does the same task, only it's rewarded with a grape. And grapes in the monkey kingdom, monkey world, are like much better than a cucumber. It's like they love grapes. So now monkey A is real excited, thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna get that. I want that grape. Let's do this task." And so monkey A performed the task like in a much faster, more efficient, and happier manner than it had done before, expecting that it would get a grape. And at the end of the day, when it finished the task, it got given another cucumber. And it flipped out because it didn't get the grape that it was expecting.
Got it. Yeah. So I don't know. That does speak to some unfairness, like perceived unfairness, you know? But so how, I guess, how would you frame something like that? You know, somebody has a situation where they do feel like they're being either they're being treated unfairly, either by somebody or by, you know, just circumstance.
Well, I suppose a way to look at it in a powerlifting sense was, say I just hit a 5-pound PR and I'm really excited. I just outworked my butt off and I had a 5-pound PR. Heck yeah. And then I watch Mike and Mike gets a 10-pound PR. Now all of a sudden I'm pissed because Mike got 10 pounds and I only got 5 pounds. Like you getting a 10-pound PR does not take away my 5-pound PR. Why? Like, just enjoy it.
Yeah,
Like,
I see what you're saying. It's focusing on that, like it's a non-zero sum game. Like it's a game that we can all win together, you know, that it's in the sense of you can get stronger, you can improve yourself, and you can, you know, reach whatever performance goal that you've got. It is a zero sum game in the sense that somebody's going to win and other people will not. But if you're going to focus on the performance aspect of powerlifting, then yeah, I mean, I agree with you that you've got to focus on your own achievements. And to be honest, that strikes me as being the most healthy way to pursue the sport in the long term anyway. Focusing on your own performance. I've talked in other podcasts as well about being a fan of Stoic philosophy in general. And there's a big emphasis on focusing on things that are within your sphere of control. You know, you hitting a 5-pound PR is within your sphere of control. Someone else hitting a 10-pound PR is not. And that shouldn't really weigh on you, you know, because what can you do about that? You know, just like if you go to a competition and perform well but don't win, you know, what, are you going to be upset like that? You kind of look like a jerk when you do that. And I've been that jerk, you know.
right, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been that jerk before too. I think at some point we probably all are a little bit. I mean, like, I suppose it's kind of a matter of perspective, right? How do you look at the situation on that particular moment? And then there's oftentimes where, you know, you look at that particular moment like, he got 5 more pounds than me, like, screw that guy. And then, you know, maybe an hour later you calm down, you're less emotional and be like, you know, I'm still pretty happy with my day. It's a good day. I got a PR. Like, heck yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. That these things are always a process that you're always working through them on a kind of continual basis, right?
Sure, for sure. So, and I think one of the things that, like, the theme of trying to create positivity does is that it's not so much in, like, this example of being right or wrong. It's more a matter of, like, it helping you get to that point where you can get back to, cool, I got a 5-pound PR. I'm happy with my day. Because, I mean, sure, there's lots of different ways to go about the mental game aspect. You know, the human mind's a very complex thing. But at the end of the day, to me, if we're not creating that positivity in us as a person and us as a lifter, we're not going to enjoy it as more. If we're not going to enjoy, if we are enjoying it less, I feel our results are going to be less as well.
That, you know, that's a good point. Let's stay on that for a second, just because, like, if you think about it in the sense that you do have to put in a lot of work for a long time to get, you know, to develop yourself as far as you can. it's easier to do that work if you're having fun with it. Like an example I heard at some point that really stuck with me, and I think it's just a neat example. Take a kid, a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or something like that, and take them to a park to play, and they run and they play and they jump and they do all this activity, huge amount of activity, and they do it voluntarily as well. Now take them to I don't know, take them to a farm and tell them that they're going to work. It's different, right? That if it's perceived as something fun, you get a lot more voluntary effort. But if it's not perceived as fun, then you don't get as much voluntary effort. And I mean, that's kind of like, well, hooray, Captain Obvious moments, right? But
right.
it's still worth noting, I think, that your training needs to be something that you enjoy. It needs to be something that you can look forward to, if not all the time. Of course, not all the time, but by and large, it needs to be something that you enjoy and can get some sort of positive affect from. Otherwise, it's way more difficult to put in the amount of time required to get what it is that we say that we want out of this, especially when there's no other external rewards, really.
Right. For sure. Like I was saying about like the high level athletes in the NFL and stuff like that, like they have, I feel like some of this stuff is more important for a power lifter in a sense than, because we don't have that $1 million contract as that reward. So like you say, we got to find a way to enjoy this process. And I mean, for me, like, yeah, if I didn't, like, why would I spend, so much time? Why would I spend so much money and so much effort and so much time doing this if I didn't enjoy it? And, creating a lot of the positivity and doing the things for the person is going to bleed over and lifter. And you're going to have more fun with it. I'm having more fun with my training than I ever have in a very long time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the consistent effort that I've been putting in over the past couple of years on this mental front.
Nice.
And life too, man. Like, I'm loving life right now. all the like different changes and stuff that I've been making, the move, just everything that I've been doing, like, it's amazing.
That's great, man. And that kind of speaks to, something that you touched on in the beginning of our chat here, and also in the beginning of your class, is, I guess treating the person as well as the athlete. Treating isn't the word I want to use there, but addressing rather the person and the athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're connected. Very, on every level, they're connected. Like, it's not, you can't like disconnect your athlete from your person. Like, you are in and of the same person and the same being. So things that you do are going to benefit each other in a sense. If you're like two different people, I suppose the reverse example could be when I was a kid and I found the barbell and I found the weight room, it saved me from doing more harm to myself. It gave me that outlet. So the barbell helped the person. Now, then the person can also help the lifter.
It's kind of like incorporating like athlete or lifter into part of your identity makes the whole a bit better off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
at least in this particular case.
Like, I guess turning the book back onto you a little bit here, how I feel like you've handled your injury and what you've gone through the past couple of years pretty well. And I think that speaks volumes to you as a person being good and comfortable with who you are and things that you're doing in life outside of training and outside of lifting and competing. That, I mean, I'm sure there's been lots of ups and downs, but there hasn't like appeared to be this major identity crisis. We see some lifters when they get injured, they're like, "Oh my God, who am I?" Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, I've got some big benefits that a lot of people don't enjoy, and that I didn't lose a lot of my social network by virtue of the fact that I can continue on as a coach. I still get to see the same people and do a lot of the same things. And in some ways, it's better because I don't have to cut weight. So I get to partake in all the eating and things that
Right.
go along with competitions, but. No, seriously though, that helps a lot. But another thing that I've talked about a couple times at this point, and with Bryce Krawcheck and some others, um, it's just that I've spent a I did spend a considerable amount of time thinking about it before I got to this point. That hey, this is a thing that happens to everybody eventually, so you may as well be mentally prepared for the potential, you know. And and I keep saying every time this comes up that I don't know that I'm off the platform for good. I would like to show up again, and I'm trying to make some inroads toward that. But um, yeah, I mean, if it doesn't work out, then hey, it doesn't work out, and I've kind of made my peace with it. And I think that I would be in a better space mentally to handle the kind of stuff that we were just talking about, where you can have a good performance but not place how you wanted and still be okay with it.
Right.
This ties in interestingly, I think, with my conversation I had with Dave Tate a couple weeks ago. um, just the line that you have to walk as an athlete, that if you're going to really push the envelope as far as your physical development, you have to take some risk. Like there's just risk that's inherent with pushing that. You know, you have to be willing to do something that's very physically hard. And I don't know. Like, I think you can make the argument that if you're coming from a very well-adjusted, balanced, and I've got a lot of stuff to live for kind of perspective, I wonder how that affects decision making at that kind of extreme uh, end of the curve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean,
Um,
I don't know, and I'm not saying that I would trade one for the other. Like I wouldn't want to be kind of unbalanced if that made me a better athlete, and I would never coach an athlete toward being unbalanced simply for athletic improvement. I
right.
think that's pretty unethical, but I do think it's an interesting thought experiment, that if that were the goal for a moment, you know, somebody said, "Hey, I don't care if this wrecks me mentally, this is what I want to do," and you
Right.
were somehow able to agree to that, would that be the best way to go about it? I don't know.
There's a couple of things you said there that kind of give me some of the words to put this into a good perspective. You had to put a lot of thought into going through that, right? You said there's a lot of thinking that went involved to get to that point where for you to be like, okay, that you might not be able to get back on the platform. You're
Yeah.
not ruling it out yet, but there's still a lot of thought processes that had to go into that. I mean, that in and of itself is that mental training and
Yeah.
putting that thought in, and you have to go through those thought processes to get to an end point. And much like how we always talk about, you know, what we do, and a lot of what we talk about isn't so much a specific program, but tools to apply to programs and things. And that's really what a lot of this classroom is just tools to give people that they can use to work on their mental game. And I want to go over the spectrum of it from person to lifter and give tools for all of those things. Like I've said before, they play into one another, and they're not mutually exclusive from one another. They're very much the same thing.
Yeah, that does make sense. So suppose as we kind of move back toward talking about your class for a minute, obviously we can't get into the entirety of what you cover in your class. Your class is 10 lessons long. So this is kind of the Cliff's Notes version at best of what you'll be discussing during your class. But if I'm thinking about signing up for your class, what should be my aspiration? Like what should I hope to come away from the class knowing or doing better, or like should I have some sort of a goal when I'm approaching it?
I mean, it's hard for me to say that there should be goals for you to approach it, because I think everybody's going to get kind of something a little bit different from it, and it might depend on what that person's individual needs are, will drive some of those goals. But I suppose the end intent, like I say, is to give tools, to go out and have tools to use and apply and practice to help create a more positive self-image for the person and the lifter, ways to create habits that you desire, ways to become more aware of like what you're doing and who you are, ways to break mental barriers in training. You know, are you intimidated of putting that red plate on there? Are you intimidated of putting another plate on there? Removing some of that intimidation, ways to kind of hopefully help like face some of the things that are keeping you from going further, either in life or as an athlete.
Got it. Yeah. So is there anything that you would want to pass on to people who are, I mean, thinking about joining your class or not? I mean, we've just spent a considerable amount of time talking about mental training, just kind of broad strokes overview stuff, and sort of your origins, like how you got into barbell training and what that's meant to you, at least a little bit. Is there anything that you'd like to leave the people with?
I suppose if I were on the fence, it kind of reminds me of a few years ago when I started realizing that like I had some things that I needed to work on. And I was like on the fence and back and forth thinking about whether or not to hire a life coach to help teach me some of the tools that I'm going to discuss in this classroom. And at the end of the day, I decided, I'm like, you know what? I do so much of these other things, whether it be training or, you know, snowboarding and trips and do this and do that. Like I owe it to myself to spend the money and then make an investment on myself. And it was probably the best money that I've ever spent in my entire life, was making that investment in myself.
All right,
because
man.
I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anything about it. So it made a huge difference. Kind of like there, you know, there's always that choice of, oh, I'm struggling with training. Should I hire a coach to write my programming? It's not
Nah, man, just do the program you found on the internet.
right. I mean, I suppose anybody that has a coach knows that that was one of the best things they ever did for their lifting.
Well, I hope so. I hope that people have those types of coaching experiences kind of wherever they're going.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I totally get you too about like the potential positive impact that a coach can make on just another person. whatever knowledge that they seek to impart on whoever they're developing. Coaching, mentoring, things like that. That's important and difficult to get in a lot of different ways too. It's just I don't know. It's something that seems like it used to be baked into social structures a lot more. Um, whether it was like apprenticeships and things like that would provide some mentorship. I'm sure not always great mentorship, but something, and more robust social structures in general seem like there's a benefit to a lot of that stuff. I mean, there's drawbacks as well, for sure, but there's a benefit that's been lost, and maybe one way to get that back is through a more, I guess, motivated, more focused effort on bringing some of that coaching expertise into your life.
For sure.
That's interesting. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about the class and just everything. There's a lot here and a lot more that could be here. So, if anybody is interested in joining Ross's class, you can get there through reactivetrainingsystems.com. If you just go to the store and look at our classroom options, you'll see it there. The class is scheduled to start the first Thursday in January. So look forward to seeing everybody in class. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Reactive Training Systems. Reactive training systems.